Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Hiruzen actually cared about Naruto, part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. A week after the demonic disaster named Kyuubi almost leveled Konoha, notices went out to the Anbu. Several senior ninja now had new, internal duties. For some reason, the three Hyuga Anbu began spying on the Uchiha. Two Uchiha spied on the Hyuga. The Inuzuka Anbu members were tasked with the Ino Shika-cho clans. The Nara clan spied on the Inuzuka. Hitaki Kakashi was pulled from his grief over the death of his sensei to start surveillance on the civilian council members. No one knew why they were tasked away from reconstruction or intensified border patrol. Internal spying was usually a matter for Root, wasn't it, or the counter-espionage group. A few people tried to get the Hokage or even Jiraiya to explain what was going on. Orders were orders, the Hokage sat resolute and said nothing. Indeed, most of the Anbu didn't question their orders. The Hyuga were naturally suspicious of the Uchiha loathed the Hyuga. A few Anbu were now getting paid by the Hokage to do what their clans would normally have them do in their off hours. Reports flowed into the Hokage. The information he wanted to know was so strange. Were the Uchiha talking with people outside of their compound more often? Did the Yamanaka clan ninjas talk with a lot of civilians? It was a full week later that notices went out to the clan heads and the elder counselors. There was a meeting at 9, that night, less than 2 hours distant. The newly reinstated Hokage wasn't known for being dramatic, so the counselors and clan heads showed up expecting either great or terrible news. 2 weeks after the Kyuubi disaster, they were expecting more dire news. They were proven correct when an unspeakably angry Sarutobi Hiruzen stormed into the room. Normally a genial sort, an angry Hokage had the council nervous. The news was going to be terrible, had Iwa resumed the war. It wasn't every day that the most powerful ninja in the fire country seemed like a raging volcano. Disquieting thoughts bubbled up in the minds of everyone present. Sit, he said at barely a whisper, still everyone fell into their seats. A rather dour-looking Toad Sanin, Jiraiya, followed the Hokage into the room. Then, ominously, the doors were shut and sealed from the outside. This was a rare sort of security precaution. All the evidence pointed to war. How many of you in this room like living in a hidden village? The Hokage asked. The assembled elders and clan heads of the village were surprised at the question. A lot of shrugging and confusion followed. This wasn't the way Sarutobi usually spoke. He was direct and to the point. Raise your hands if you like living in Konoha. The barked command shocked the listeners. Everyone raised a hand. This was embarrassing to them, like being back in the ninja academy. Raise your hand, the angry Hokage said, if you love that we're nestled into a vast forest. A forest our Shodai Hokage endowed to us, his greatest and most incredible work, something that could never be replicated, not with all the earth and water users in fire country. The counselors and clan heads did nothing. That just made the Hokage angrier. If you like living in a forest, raise your hand. Again, all the hands went up. And who here had donated their time to helping those injured in the disaster? To making life a bit better for your neighbor, for the man who sells you daikon, or the woman who bakes your bread? All of you, right? Some hands went up without a thought. The more snobbish clan leaders reluctantly raised theirs, as if they had difficulties remembering ever helping anyone. I can assume everyone here wants their children, their heirs, to grow up among the leaves, right? This was an easy one. All the hands rose up as one. Yes. Many of you have just had children. Some are the new clan heirs. Some will, unfortunately, have to replace clan heirs who died during those horrible events when the hospital was damaged and part of a village wall caved in. That sad history had been discussed among the clans. Why did Sarutobi bring up such a painful subject now? The Yamanakas had lost a son, the designated heir. The Aburame had lost 2 children and their clan head, extinguishing that branch of the family. The Uchiha had lost almost 10% of their ninja, including the third in line to be clan head behind Fugaku's own 2 sons. Yes, it's a fine thing to live in a village like this one. A fine thing. 3 Hokages to date have died to keep this place alive. I checked the rolls and another 1800 Junin ranked ninja have died in our decades of skirmishes, intrigues, and wars. A beautiful forest we have grown from blood, sweat, and ground bone. A beautiful place to raise children. The clan heads, in particular, had no idea if Sarutobi had lost his mind. The words coming out of his mouth, this anger, what had happened? If it wasn't war, what was it? Sarutobi stopped for a moment, looked at Jiraiya, and took a deep breath. Fine. Everyone in here is loyal to the leaf. So you attest. Now tell me if you'd all like to have stone ninjas attack us in a week. Anyone? The elders looked confused. What the Hokage said wasn't a declaration of war, was it? No one wants that, Hokage-sama, said the acting head of the Aburame clan. With the previous head's death, the internal politics of selecting a new permanent head would take time. No one says they want that, Jiraiya said, his tone even angrier than the Hokages. But that's what you cloud-headed fools almost caused. What? The Uchiha clan head shouted. A number of other people jumped to their feet to defend their patriotism. Sit, the Hokage said, barely constraining his rage. All of you return to your seats. We have much to discuss. Sarutobi was usually so mild-mannered that it was odd to see him stand and begin pacing the way a caged tiger might, and the council knew that this aged man was more deadly than any tiger. Because of the devastation from the Kyuubi's attack, we are at our weakest right now, the third Hokage said, his weariness only exceeded with the vigor of his anger. You all know this. It's vital we keep this truth secret. Right. We must repair ourselves as fast as possible, giving our enemies as small an opportunity as possible to learn of our distress. The assembled elders all agreed. Who knew what Stone or Cloud might do if they had accurate information as to what had happened? Even their ally Hidden Sand might get some fool-headed ideas given the chance. The main wall hadn't been completely repaired yet, and Konoha's surviving ninja forces were mostly injured or despondent in grief at the present moment. Battle-hardened ninja knew what it was like to fight in battle. But to fight the unstoppable, the juggernaut of a Biju, that was something else entirely. Some of the ninja on the battlefield might never be right in the head again. Secrecy. We all know the importance. It's common sense. It's been discussed in this very chamber 2 times since the attack. So how is it that 1 or more traitors sit on this council, traitors who would draw the Stone Army to us? That prompted more outcry, of course. The look on the Hokage's face was enough to put down this eruption of self-preservation. You, all of you in this room save the Aburame and 2 of the minor clans now present, were told 8 days ago of this village's most recent S-class secret. I even formed a special law to protect this information, to keep Konoha and also the young sacrifice safe. Danzo, along with Homura, finally understood what this was about. The head of Root began trying to figure out how he was going to survive this. Sarutobi would assign a slap on the wrist, right? Perhaps a loss of political power or a forced retirement. But a retired ninja can maintain unofficial power for a very long time. Danzo's mind churned through his options. Less than a week later, what do I find? Defiance, passing of the secret through the clans, even civilians discussing military secrets on the street corner. For a normal secret, I would be angry but dismiss it as a bit of venting, dangerous but potentially necessary. But not for this secret. Now you shall know why I am so angry, so furious. A team of Chunin out patrolling 7 days ago discovered something that chilled my blood. The angry face of Sarutobi became fixed. A spy from Stone, rushing back to Earth Country as quickly as he could. Cold horror bloomed in the minds of not a few clan heads present. The greater part of the room now saw where this story was going, and they were too weak to keep Sarutobi and Jiraiya from doing what they had now resolved had to do. This spy was taken down easily, by surprise, and sent to interrogation. Do you want to know what this spy had learned just from walking our streets? He knew the classified details of what had happened to Kyuubi, even the name of the Jinchuriki. He knew the specifics of the sealing array used, he knew even how long the seal had to be in place, 9 years, before we could be absolutely sure that Kyuubi would die when his jailer died. He knew details I released to this council only 1 day before the spy heard them. These details I only released to this council under great duress, and under my special law. Why then did a spy learn them so quickly, a spy so green he was taken down by Chunin eating their dinner while out on patrol? The Uchiha head had grown paler and paler. I protest. Sit down, you blowhard. You and your ilk have almost brought a war upon us at the time we're least able to cope with one. To think I thought this council was worth the frustration, that the idea of participation and semi-representative democracy was valuable, that it would keep us from becoming monstrous and corrupt, that we were different from stone and cloud and hidden mist because our clans and our villagers could be involved in governance. I was a fool. I considered some of you as adversaries or as annoyances. But I was wrong. As a body, this council is worthless except to bring down ruin upon us. You can't keep your mouths shut. So many treasonous things have begun in the minds of people who had the privilege of sitting in this room. I should strike these betrayers down as I speak. The Uchiha shut up midway through that vitriol. He was a formidable ninja, but the professor could knock him to pieces in minutes, having developed now forbidden techniques that negated the Sharingan's predictive and copying abilities. You all expected me not to notice you were violating military intelligence protocol. That you were spreading vital, classified information so freely that a green spy from Stone, here on a simple training mission, could learn our most critical secrets within hours of entering our village. I am not a doddering fool. I have not forgotten my job in the all too brief time that the Yondaime took the leadership of Konoha. I am the fire shadow. I have the will of fire, but today I must also harden my heart and perform a most painful duty. For 1 week I have had my Anbu spying on all of you. I preyed on old hatreds and no one questioned why I was spying on my own people so soon after a disaster. I have a good deal of evidence, enough to pass judgment. For breaking the special Kyuubi law, this council, for my powers as Hokage in a time of disaster or war, is dissolved. All of you will submit to informal questioning as to what you know of this security leak. Those of you responsible will spend time with the Anbu interrogators. Those who maliciously broke the law will receive the full sentence, death. Those who are merely stupid or gossips will be removed as ninjas. None of the guilty will ever hold positions of prominence in this village again. At this the head of the Uchiha clan attacked. It was either he assassinate the Hokage now, or die a traitor later. The Hokage had expected it. The Hyuga Anbu had provided evidence that suggested nearly every Uchiha knew of the Jinchuriki, and it was clear that news was passing to civilians from several Uchiha. Perhaps they expected for village mobs to deal with the Jinchuriki, not caring that the seal needed time to bind the Kyuubi's soul to the young boys. Not caring that it was entirely likely that this act of vengeance would give Kyuubi back all his power. The Uchiha would destroy anything, even a baby, that had the potential to become more powerful than even their greatest prodigies. It was the Uchiha way. Konoha had always gone along, turning a blind eye, in the past. Well, save for when the Shadaime and Uchiha Madara got into a battle over their tactics and goals. The Hokage batted away the fire attack as he leveled a massive killer intent at the only Uchiha in the room. This attack was one the professor had used very rarely, but it worked. The amount of fear generated within the hate-filled Uchiha's mind caused a blood vessel to burst. The man fell over, incapacitated and slowly dying. Anyone else care to challenge me? The Hokage looked over the cowering morons with disgust. I may be old, but I can kill the strongest of you just by glaring at you. The quivering mass of the dying Uchiha clan leader on the floor gave testament to that. All of you will be taken for questioning by several people I trust implicitly. The traitors will feel the talents of the Anbu torture squad. You will reveal the name of every person you informed of this secret, and why. This is not a gossipy shugi parlor, this is a military village. Secrets, even one you hate, can kill us if known to a wide audience. Jiraiya, usually a goofball, looked as severely angered as the Hokage. He finally spoke up. My greatest student gave his life to save this pissant village, and all of your pettiness nearly took that and threw it away. I counseled against sharing any information with you. I had a more hard-nosed understanding of what many of you were. Sensei decided to trust in your military instincts, your self-preservation instincts. He has already admitted his folly. Stone could have mobilized and been here within a week, and they would have known exactly which child to secure. They'd have killed the poor tyke, because they are truly heartless bastards, and Kyuubi's chakra would have been free to reform a demonic body. All of us would have died. We've let you spoiled princesses poke your noses into things for too long. I'm going to start my interrogation with the Hyuga. The Hokage just nodded. As of now, I am sole leader of the village. All of the special dispensations for clans are void, as several clans have brought us to war and should feel the pain of what they did, and I will appoint special advisors to deal with trade, reconstruction, relations with the daimyo, and other matters. We're done. The Hokage and Jiraiya left through what had been a sealed door. The other door to the room opened, and a variety of Anbu who did not come from clans poured into the room and overwhelmed the mostly elderly council members. Some of these people had once been fighters, but they couldn't easily stand up to men 30 or 40 years younger. Some hadn't even trained regularly in a decade or longer, so used to sitting in the council chambers and meddling in things not within their purview. The civilian councilors, who had not been invited to this meeting, were dragged from their homes by masked Anbu. The kinder Anbu used pressure points to knock them unconscious. A few of the ones who'd experienced council politics before were a bit more aggressive. The Hokage had approved all of this in advance. After all, he did understand the power of a bit of theater for the general populace. Inside and outside the council chamber, the guiltiest struggled the hardest. They had caused the Hokage to invoke the penalty clauses of his law, they had caused the power of the clans to be somewhat broken. It was possible that none of the clans would be trusted for a long time to come after all the revelations came out. None of the Anbu seemed at all concerned when they broke arms or had to stab a person to keep him from escaping. The bloody scene inside the room would keep it from being used as a meeting space for a long time. The Hokage did not have it remodeled for nearly a decade, as he considered it an honest, vicious blot, one that should be remembered, on the village hidden in the leaves. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. The Anbu began the interrogation of Danzo a few minutes after 3 o'clock in the morning. The man had been a rival for years, but Sarutobi had enjoyed the sparring for a good long while. He had never thought his, perhaps friend was so deep in corruption. The more of these interrogations Sarutobi listened to, the more out of touch he felt. All this vile, beastly plotting inside his village walls. Minato had asked Sarutobi 2 months ago what he should do about Danzo. The young Hokage had been considering forcing the aged root commander on a suicide mission just to be rid of him. Sarutobi had counseled against it, a foolish effort. Sarutobi steeled himself and stood behind the one-way mirror. It was nearing 4 o'clock in the morning, but Sarutobi subsisted on anger right now. Now, Danzo, the interrogator said, one of the few interrogation specialists who weren't compromised in some way by Root's blackmail or coercion schemes. Tell me the names of those you informed about the Kyuubi aftermath. You're going to kill me anyway. I have confessed my crimes, fallen on my sword for a once great, now wasting away village. That is enough, I think. The interrogator, one of the few remaining who was trained during the Nadime's reign as Hokage, leaned forward. You know my reputation, Danzo. Do you really want to see my technique with your own eye? Sarutobi stifled a laugh at the little joke. Mocking Danzo for his infirmities was wrong, huh? Sarutobi hadn't stayed up for this many continuous hours in a good many years. The hours were wearing on him. You wouldn't. That bastard Sarutobi signed a warrant, didn't he? It's bad enough you're going to kill me, but torture. The kind I practice, well, it doesn't leave much in the way of a mark. Do your worst. Sarutobi closed his eyes and rubbed them. Danzo's holding out like this said that he knew something important. He was being stubborn to demonstrate something, to win a concession, or maybe to be a bastard until the bitter end. Yakogi would find the information. The number of failures the man had could be counted on 2 hands, all due to his subjects' hearts giving out under stress. Less than 10 died from the more than 1,000 who had chatted with this legend. Sarutobi watched as the barrel of water was carted into the room. Is there nothing I can do to prevent this? The interrogator asked his subject. Die. Danzo spat. Not today. Not because of you. You should feel lucky I am your lowly interrogator. Had you been before the Shodai Hokage himself, you would feel living wood piercing under your finger and toenails, growing millimeter by millimeter until you begged for death. My technique is less refined. Well, we shall begin. The old interrogator formed some hand seals and a thin column of water erupted from the tank. The first bit formed up a collar around Danzo's neck. He was immobilized. The next bit splashed against the man's lips and teeth, prying them open and continuing down his throat. The water hung there, holding Danzo and suffocating him. As Danzo's eyes lit up in horror at feeling a technique that should never have been invented, Yakogi performed another set of hand seals, and the water from his throat, esophagus, lungs, and stomach began to draw back, slowly. By the time the water was gone, Danzo was nearly passed out. It was a pain. Sarutobi knew from watching Yakogi work, the inevitable blackouts this technique caused. But Yakogi was always cautious to begin and quick to stop once a subject had broken. The names, Danzo. Tell me the names. The leaf is rotten. Danzo's damaged vocal cords rumbled. The branches are rotting. When the fire comes, the leaf will burn. Yakogi made more hand seals and the process repeated itself. Sarutobi left the room and let Yakogi ply his trade. He had other conversations to observe. The Uchiha elders had been taken as a group a few hours ago. Jiraiya had one of them now. You can't do that to us. You can't. That was a female voice. Fugaku's wife, Makoto. Sarutobi stepped into the viewing area and fully closed the door. You are mistaken, Jiraiya said. The clan laws have been repealed by a wartime decree, the village council has been disbanded, too. Now, you will tell me how you were told the true details of the Kyuubi attack. I have rights. I demand to speak with my husband. Sarutobi was surprised that she didn't already know. Jiraiya must be saving that information for a reason. Right now, you are suspected of treason. I don't think the Hokage cares much about your rights. Fugaku would never permit this. Sarutobi recognized that the woman had entered a kind of fugue state. Her brain just wasn't processing the questions Jiraiya asked anymore. Your husband is dead. That got a reaction. It wasn't a scream or tears or even shock. The only thing Sarutobi noticed was her lip beginning to quiver. She was a trained kunoichi, after all, and could mask her emotions. How? He attempted to assassinate the Hokage with a fire jutsu. The Hokage? Well, he proved why he was Hokage then. Your husband died a minute or two later. We are broken, then. All the Uchiha elders are in cells like this one. None of you will ever leave, not until we understand the full extent of this treason. All this, the destruction of our clan, for one simple little baby. He should be dead. I care not for a discussion of policy with a traitor like yourself. I care only for information. Now, speak. The Hokage wouldn't kill the child, so the Uchiha elders, all of us, we decided to plant the seed of an idea. A bit of overheard gossip here, and eventually some civilian makes an attempt and gives everyone else the idea that child should be dead. Names. Now, Sarutobi had heard enough of this. All the Uchiha elders, 6 ninja in number now that Fugaku was dead, all conspiring. They would have to be killed. Minato thought he was ending the chaos and destruction, saving the village. But the method of salvation he chose was now ripping the hidden leaf to shreds, exposing the rot that was far more widespread than Sarutobi had feared to imagine. Sarutobi walked out and picked up a clipboard. The preliminary results were in. Of the 21 council members and minor clan advisors, 14 had broken the law. Of the civilian council members who were informed of the Kyuubi details, all of them had broken the law. Sarutobi had long debated with himself whether there more danger sharing military information with civilians who did not, and could not, understand the importance of discretion or in allowing only ninja to get restricted information. The answer was still unclear. He flipped a few pages on the clipboard. Many of the other counselors knew that the law had been violated and did nothing. They would receive lighter sentences, but they were not innocent. Right now, the Anbu had warrants to apprehend more than 40 civilians. The days of the Uchiha-led Konoha police force were over. Civilians would need to get used to being handled by the Anbu. That reminded Sarutobi to have the police force records audited and examined. Hopefully there would be no irregularities. It was just another blow. How much of the village would revolt? Would it lead to a civil war, over something like this, over a baby who kept the raging chakra of a demon held back? Were trained ninja so blind, leaving aside civilians, so given to their passions? Sarutobi set down the clipboard. He knew that Ebisu, the former head of Ninja Force Internal Affairs, an oft-hated figure for his role in policing, well, the police and the ninja and anyone else who worked for the Hokage. He was an honest sort, but his days as a line ninja were over. He'd be, accidentally, killed by teammates while on a mission. Sarutobi mulled this over as he settled in to listen to another interrogation. Perhaps Ebisu should go into training the young. It would be nothing at all to make him a special Junin, a pity for a talented ninja. It was hard to get someone to take a role in internal affairs, but necessary. Ebisu had done a great service then, as he was doing now. Yamanaka Inoichi was likely innocent, but Ebisu would find out for sure. Sarutobi wanted to make damn sure that his lead interrogation specialist was trustworthy. The Anbu would spend weeks on these detailed interviews if Sarutobi could only trust Yakogi. He had been retired and living outside the Hidden Leaf during the Kyuubi disaster. Sarutobi had only recalled him a day ago, and was positive the man hadn't been caught up with Danzo or anyone else. He settled in to watch Ebisu and Inoichi spar. He had hours to go and his bones were weary. XXXXXXXXXXXXXX. 3 weeks after Kyuubi's defeat, the Sandaime Hokage felt every one of his 65 years of life. He walked out onto the balcony overlooking a wide avenue. It was packed with people, villagers and shinobi. He didn't have to fake the dire look on his face. Today, people of Konoha, I must relate a tale of treason to you. The gathered individuals standing outside the Hokage tower were understandably nervous. The Hokage hadn't called for a general gathering like this one since Iwa had declared war on the Leaf. Treason had to be at least as bad as a bunch of Earth Country scum. A military secret was revealed to the village council about 2 weeks ago, and they were informed that the information was subject to our highest secrecy ranking. Within the week, the majority of them were freely discussing the secret within their clans. All of the civilian members also violated the military secrecy law. This was supremely dangerous, as a young spy from another hidden village had just infiltrated our village as part of a training mission. He learned the complete details of our military secret within hours, and it was only luck that a group on patrol caught him before he crossed the border. Our council's loose lips with one of our most important military secrets nearly brought us to war, and at a time we could least expect to deal with it. Instead of repairing the walls and tending to the wounded today, we would have been fighting an enemy force looking to crush us at our weakest point. Each person who was told this military secret was questioned, and those who broke the secrecy laws were interrogated to the fullest extent. 23 civilians have been convicted of treason, as have 41 shinobi. Those convicted of the most minor offenses are currently serving time in our special military prison. Those convicted of major offenses will be executed today. That brought a gasp from the crowd. Military executions were almost always done in secret. After secret trials, the village at large never permitted to know of what had happened. Moments later, 31 people, including 7 of the Uchiha clan, were dragged from an unmarked door on the side of the Hokage Tower. Their guards brought them in front of the city wills near just to the left of where the Hokage was speaking. As Hokage, I must protect the people of the village from threats foreign and domestic. These traitors have revealed secrets that only through luck did not end in a bloody war. May you wail for all eternity in the guts of the Shinigami. A masked man to the side of the condemned let loose a fire dragon which seemed to gobble up each person. It was a powerful spectacle with an unmistakable message: military secrets will cost you your lives should you ever betray them. The Hokage continued with his speech. The Uchiha clan compound and several other properties belonging to clans and civilians have been confiscated. These Uchiha lands were originally gifts to lure that clan here, and they have been taken back for cowardly, treasonous conduct. Shortly, we will turn those spaces into affordable housing for those adversely affected by the attack. Likewise, we will be moving our orphanage into new quarters there, seeing that we have a massive increase in the numbers of children without living parents. What will happen to the remaining Uchiha? Predictably, it was a civilian shouting out the question. Why the people loved the cold-hearted Uchiha Sarutobi couldn't understand. Some will choose to resign as shinobi of the leaf and leave the village, and will be bound with a new protective seal to prevent them from ever attacking Konoha. Some have already gone Nukenin. They will be hunted down and killed after I finish teaching my anti-Sharingan tactics to our hunter ninjas. Those who remain loyal to Konoha will remain welcome to live with us. However, they will no longer have the right to control our police force nor a right to sit on a council should it ever be reformed. Traitors, among them all the Uchiha elders, should never prosper from their acts. The Hokage's speech continued, and the village's opinion of the man changed. While he had cultivated a laid-back reputation, he now demonstrated why he was the strongest ninja in the village, even at his advanced age. Those few who had escaped detection even after learning about the Kyuubi being sealed into a child knew they had to keep the knowledge secret. The Hokage was willing to follow through on his law. XXXXXXXXXXXXXX. This is intolerable, Lord Hokage, Hyuga Hiyashi said. He had become clan head only 2 years earlier after his father retired and joined the Hyuga elders. None of my clan has been convicted of anything. None of us were responsible for letting the secret escape. You personally followed the letter of the law, Hiyashi. But you broke its spirit. Some in your clan, like the 2 executed elders, openly flouted my decree after they got the information from the Uchiha or others. Remind me, Hiyashi, of how much you knew about the whispering of the other clans, and what you did to stop it. Hiyashi remained stone-faced. Correct. It is a shinobi's task to maintain secrets, his own, his village's. Your clan failed in that respect. You heard the whispers, your clan associates heard them, and most had enough sense to not pass them along. Why did you not come to me? Tell me. My few remaining Anbu have been severely taxed with their reduced numbers, severely wounded comrades, and greatly increased duties. The clans needed to step up, and didn't. This is conduct I should reward. Encourage. Aside from those disgraced old men, who have paid the ultimate price, my clan did nothing wrong. The young Jonin kept trying to argue but a single opinion. It wasn't a strong case to make and Hiyashi was still a relatively poor negotiator. It is not commission I blame you for, but omission. You did not act to stop this. You are as guilty as any of the fools burnt to cinders for almost bringing us to war. This argument will not wash. Hiyashi, as collected as ever, nodded. Then I must inform you, Lord Hokage, that the Hyuga will be asserting the right of severing from the hidden leaf. You will follow the traitorous Uchiha, the confused Akamichi, the decimated Kentaro. It is solely within your discretion. I will not even attempt to oppose or delay you. But answer me a question. What do you hope to gain? Hiyashi had not moved during this exchange, but now he looked a bit irresolute. We must maintain a position within a village where we are respected. That is no longer the case here, Lord Hokage. We will seek a powerful new alliance. Sarutobi just nodded his head, not terribly surprised at the continuing Hyuga arrogance. Their remaining elder council was filled with fools who had not held a kunai in decades, and they dictated policy to the clan head. Hiyashi seemed to at least recognize the futility of what he was forced to do today. After all, where would they go? Hidden Mist, the place where the bloodline wars were in full swing. Hidden Cloud, which had several times before attempted to capture, not kill, Byakugan users out on missions. Hidden Stone, which had only been deterred from a continuing war after Minato savaged their last, largest armed attempt at invasion. Hidden Sand, Hidden Grass, Hanzu's Hidden Rain, maybe petition a daimyo to form a new hidden village. No, none of these would kowtow to the Hyuga. Hiyashi likely already knew this, but his honor, as defined by the Hyuga elders, would demand prominence and privilege. I wish you the best of luck then, Hiyashi. Be careful. The Hyuga need no luck. Sarutobi frowned after Hiyashi left his office. This would not end well. But he would not return to coddling of the clans, letting them trample through the village as if no one else mattered. The great unraveling was in full swing. That would be his terrible legacy. But at least the hidden leaf might have the opportunity to grow stronger from his difficulty. Goodbye, Hyuga Hiyashi. May the kami guide you safely, and may you hide from the hungry eyes of the Shinigami. XXXXXXXXXXXXXX. Sarutobi Hiruzen, the famed ninja professor, could barely keep a civil tongue in his head. The remaining teachers in the academy, comprising those not killed by the Kyuubi and not withdrawn from Hidden Leaf by departing clans and minor families, had the gall to present these records. It was a disgrace. The Anbu would have another task to sort out very soon. Retired school teachers would soon be visiting Inoichi. Sarutobi thought he himself might be due for a torture session, as well, for not spotting this mess sooner. Let me see if I understand this. The academy had an unofficial policy of handling disciplinary matters differently depending upon who the student's sponsor was. An abashed Chunin named Seiko Noda nodded, unable to form up words. He had never expected to be interrogated by the Hokage of all people concerning the academy and its running. So, if I were to sponsor a student who was disruptive, causing havoc with the other students' learning, how would it be handled? Delicately. And if a similar student spent his time painting classrooms green or planting traps for the teachers, but came from a civilian family? Expulsion. The Junin I entrusted to oversee the academy was a fool then. Best for him that he's now dead. We will rebuild the walls of the building soon enough, but we will not re-implement all the old policies. Do you all understand me? He got back a chorus of discouraged, "Hi, Hokage-sama." The Hokage turned to question an Anbu who had been tasked with examining odd caches of paperwork found in the homes of the Traitor Council members. And these papers you wished to discuss? What relevance do they have with schooling? I believe, the masked Anbu cautiously began, that council members would from time to time pay a visit to certain Chunin at the academy. To what end? To make suggestions, especially on team formation. That is my job. The Anbu nodded, pausing to think his way through a minefield. Correct. But the Lord Hokage listens to advice, if I'm not mistaken. Especially the teacher-generated commentary on each student's progress and assessment of strengths and weaknesses. The Hokage nodded. He turned to look back at Seiko Noda. Is it true? Was pressure applied? The Chunin nodded. Were the comments always accurate? Complete and accurate. The Chunin shook his head and let out a long-held breath. Were favors or money exchanged for these considerations? The terrified Chunin nodded again. The Hokage looked at the other teachers. That none of them would meet his eyes was proof enough. Anbu, what was the end result of these contacts, aside from team placement? I haven't finished reviewing the documents, but the pile I have reviewed suggests a troubling pattern. Yes, if Lord Hokage would care to review team composition for the last decade, I am sure he would find that clan team members often find themselves on teams with other clan members. Yes, I agree with that. And that the teams formed by civilian or orphan children rarely passed their Junin sensei's personal examinations. You've got to be kidding me. It was so obvious now that someone else had unraveled this mess. The Hokage felt like a fool, but he spent so little time on the academy. Not with wars looming in Junin to oversee and manage an A and S ranked missions. He had felt comfortable delegating most of the academy issues to people he thought trustworthy, which now seemed misplaced. So, the clans look better if their children always perform better than other student ninja, get on better teams, pass out of the academy earlier. This is ridiculous. Half the Hokages have come from no clan, and the other two came from the same one and were ridiculously talented in their own right, not from long-maintained bloodlines. Namikaze Minato, our greatest Hokage, was completely untaught until he reached the academy, and then he grew like a weed. I confess to having excellent tutors early in life. But this kind of sabotage, making the clans look powerful by literally making everyone else fail and look weak. Am I hearing this right? The masked Anbu just nodded. This sounds like treason to me. Subversion of the village's military strength for favors and money. Have them all taken to interrogation. Let's get the whole picture. The masked Anbu nodded, and a few Chunin, fearing this conclusion, tried to escape. One found out it was not possible to shunshin from this room. Sarutobi knew more about sealing than anyone else in Konoha save for his student Jiraiya, and the others found out that an Anbu could subdue several weak Chunin at the same time. Sarutobi watched with his anger finally ebbing away. Had he been sleeping all these long years? Not paying attention, not questioning what he was told. All of these findings made his village seem like something else, something foreign and revolting. Had his conception of the hidden leaf always been a lie? Or had he let corruption eat away at it? Sarutobi pondered. Hitaki, strong clan and exceptional warriors. But that new Junin Maida guy was easily Kakashi's equal, and was an orphan. For every powerful clan Junin Sarutobi could think of, there were 2 or 3 non-clan ones who were as good or better. Almost all the remaining Anbu were non-clan. Uzumaki Kushina had come from a clan in Whirlpool Country. She had been the last clan Anbu captain. Sarutobi would need to dig deeper. Had the early compromises necessary to fuse Senju and Uchiha, which made Konoha attractive to other clans, rotted the village this way? Could it have been possible for things to have gone differently, for Sarutobi to have managed things differently? These last weeks had severely disarranged nearly everything he thought he knew. He hoped there were few more surprises in store, for him or the village. In a fit of anger, his hand snaked out and plucked up one of the many folders discussed in this room in the past few days. The Hyuga. He flipped it open and began reviewing the report. Graduated 1 or 2 genin every year from the academy. Had 17 active Chunin at the time of their leaving, and 62 feet retired Chunin. Only 7 Junin, 4 of whom were retired. More of this clan first garbage, Sarutobi realized. These retirements at Chunin level, it permitted the ninja to be trained at the village's expense and then to be used for the clan's benefit. Many of these retired Chunin had trained hard and long enough to take and pass a Junin examination, but instead they remained behind the clan walls. The other shinobi had to pick up the slack, the non-clan shinobi. There cannot be villages within villages, if the goal is to have a wholly united village. I cannot and will not permit this to happen, he vowed. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. I said no, Jiraiya reiterated. Why not? I have my reasons. That's not good enough. You know, I never was good enough for you, sensei. Wonder why I'm the only one of your students who still talks to you. Sarutobi sighed. And, again, the past intrudes upon the present. Why, in my dotage, does everyone see fit to remind me of my more youthful failings? It would have been better to correct me back then. Correct the professor. Surely you jest. He knew everything. Just ask him, he'd tell you. Very funny. I'm not smiling. Jiraiya was being difficult. This was a conversation the Sandaime Hokage had long been bracing himself to have, and now Jiraiya had been in the village to help with the final reconstruction of the village walls. Sure, the masonry had been up for some time, but it had taken 3 weeks to reinscribe all the ceiling arrays and then activate them. Jiraiya hadn't been happy to be stuck in village for 3 weeks, but he'd done it. The man claimed he was born for a life of wandering, women, and worship. The Hokage agreed with the first two, but wasn't sure what Jiraiya meant by the last. His student was a most profane, if amusing, person. If you are not willing to become Godime Hokage, Jiraiya, I must ask you to state your reasons. If it is simple resentment towards me, I am afraid that won't cut it. No, it's more than that. The Hokage nodded, waiting. I do not trust myself. I trust you. No, stop doing that. Just listen to me, would you? The Hokage just nodded. This was obviously important to his student. I do not trust myself. I thought myself at the pinnacle of my craft a few years ago. I had just trained a ninja to exceed my own remarkable feats. I had a name. I had money. I had a woman in every village and 2 in every city. I felt happy. But it wasn't to be. It was all a lie. My teammate, I distrusted him, but I did not see him for what he was doing. My student, I taught him to be great, but I taught him too well. His knowledge of sealing came to exceed my own. So when I tried to take his place, to offer my life to the Shinigami to save Konoha, I found I could not. I did not have the skill to create and understand and control the arrays. People seemed to think it was a simple matter to call down the death god and get him to do what you want, but, after he was called, his actions were all guided and controlled by the seal. Every bit of it. A man-made seal instructing and leading a god, it is as momentous an accomplishment as I make it sound. Minato created the arrays out of whole cloth in less than 4 days. Arrays to guide the death god. Arrays to restrain the Kyuubi once inside of the boy. Arrays to leech off the Kyuubi's power to make a true powerhouse of a child. Arrays to tie the Kyuubi's life force to that of the host. It has taken me 8 months since then, every day since his death, just to begin to unravel it. He was a genius. I gave him knowledge and power as a ninja. He exceeded me by age 20, he eclipsed me by age 24, the self-sacrificing bastard. I was ready to knock him unconscious and do this myself, but I felt like a toddler attending a physics convention when I tried. I now know that what he did just isn't theoretically possible. No other Jinchuriki was created this way. All of them required a quirk of the Shodai's genetics to even capture them. It wasn't possible, as I said, and Minato did it anyway. It would be like me calling down Kami, giving her a corporeal body, having my way with her to her ever-increasing pleasure, and then letting her take my soul in payment. It is the stuff of dreamers and poets and mystics. I trained and lost the most valuable person this village has ever known. I permitted the most horrible person this village has created to betray us for years, and then leave without a scratch because of your order to let him go. I suspected my teammate a lot longer than you did. For a decade or more, I watched him and told you to watch him. I feel that I am both not strong enough to have my warnings believed and not strong enough to step in and take the fatal swing of a katana should my village ever demand it. I cannot be Hokage. Not now. Not ever. Sarutobi Hiruzen looked for a place to begin unraveling this mess inside his student's mind. But he realized that Jiraiya wouldn't listen. He had convinced himself to feel unending guilt, and nothing would shake that loose. I will honor your statement, my student. But I will ask again in 1 year's time. You may, but I don't see how my answer will be any different. I have failed you then, my student. I should have struck Orochimaru down myself. That is my failing, not yours. I trained him. I knew he was powerful and a bit twisted. I allowed him to grow unrestrained, like a cancer. It fell to me to end him, but my heart was too soft. This is my shortcoming, not yours. Jiraiya nodded, but said nothing. Sarutobi was stuck. He had the same feelings of guilt, for not seeing the rot in his village for so long, but he couldn't just call himself unfit to be Hokage, and leave. He had held the office on and off for all of his adult life. There was, by definition, no one more fit to be Hokage than Sarutobi. He wanted to smoke, but just sat there, trying to think his way through this problem. The trouble was there was no easy or simple solution. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. 3 years later, the fire was everywhere. His family was expelling fireball after fireball, not caring that they hit the tents or the fragile wooden buildings. The boy looked for his younger brother, and bit back a sob when he saw the boy crushed under a fallen log. He wasn't moving at all and the fires were almost on top of him. Sasuke had only been 3. He did not deserve this. None of the Uchiha did. Little Itachi scrambled away from the fighting. He had activated his Sharingan almost 2 years ago, on his 7th birthday. He was now nearly 9 and skilled, but he had never seen a fight before. He was utterly terrified and slunk into the shadows. Soon the ninjas stopped and someone began to douse the flames. A pale man rode on a snake into the area where his adoptive parents' dead bodies lay. Itachi knew they were actually his aunt and uncle, but they had encouraged him to call them mother and father. The pale man jumped down from his snake and pulled out a surgical knife. The moment he saw his mother's severed eyeball in that man's hand, Itachi clamped down a groan. His brain felt like it was filled with stabbing kunai. And his eyes, he'd never felt so much pain. It would be days later when Itachi, all alone, realized that his Sharingan had changed. It was what the old scrolls had called Mangekyo. He had salvaged very little from the fires, but he had managed to bury his disfigured mother and father, and what the fires spared of his little brother. He vowed vengeance that day. He vowed he would be stronger than that pale man. He vowed he would step on that man's neck and carve his eyeballs out of his living head. He was Uchiha. Nothing would stop him. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. 2 years later, 5 years after the great unraveling. It felt like she was flying. Yes, definitely flying. She opened her eyes, realized she wasn't dreaming, and began to struggle against whatever was keeping her arms and legs bound. The flying stopped. The darkness around her head disappeared. You're awake. Hyuga Hinata blinked. Yes. Where is my mother? She couldn't take of you anymore. I have adopted you. That didn't make sense to her. Her father was really strong. Where's my father? He was hurt with your mother. If they get better then you can go live with them again. Okay. Well, I'm going to put this hood back on you so you can sleep. It'll be getting light out soon. Hinata didn't like the dark, but she didn't argue. Thank you. She was back in the dark, and flying again, and the story she had been told made no sense. Where were her mother and father? They were ninja. They were powerful. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. Sarutobi tried to clear his mind from all the awful news he'd gotten. Jiraiya had reported in that the entire Hyuga had been slaughtered in Wave Country, where they'd been petitioning to form a hidden village. The Wave Daimyo had apparently decided that his country's future lay not in ninja, but in shipping. He'd made a deal instead with the Gato Corporation. Sarutobi knew that man had a less than shining reputation. But the Hyuga were slaughtered to a child. The eyes removed, the bodies charred beyond recognition. Just like the Uchiha 2 years earlier in their makeshift private village in Lightning Country. All dead, all the known Sharingan possessors with their eyes cut out. Jiraiya was sure that that was Orochimaru's work. The Hyuga, not even Jiraiya could guess at. There was too little evidence left behind. Orochimaru had left shed snake skin, like he didn't even care who knew. He turned and began to walk through a park. Nature was good for restoring mental balance. This was a civilian park, rather than a military training ground, so it was filled with children. He hadn't expected it, but he saw a bright shock of yellow hair near the swings. Uzumaki Naruto. Just another orphan tucked in among so many others. Leading a happy life, as far as Sarutobi could tell. And he was watching. Every active duty Chunin now did a regular shift at the orphanage every few weeks. The children had competent watchers, in addition to the full-time civilians, and got to be exposed to ninja every day. It was an unorthodox recruitment method, as many little boys and a few girls declared they would become ninja, but it wasn't primarily done for that reason. The Hokage wanted Naruto, and the other children, kept safe. The village was smaller now. After the great unraveling, nearly 15,000 civilians had left, almost a quarter of the village population. In the elapsed time, around 5,000 new civilians had moved in. It was a different place. For the clans who'd remained in the Leaf, life was more integrated. The Aburame had mostly stayed as had the Yamanaka. All of them had integrated more into the overall hidden village. The few remaining Akamichi, those who had broken with the rest of their clan, didn't even bother living next to each other. Instead, they had a favorite restaurant in town that served as a communal meeting hall. The Nara, predictably, found it too troublesome to leave, but had largely taken over the top positions in the Anbu division that dealt with civilian matters. Their clan techniques were quite effective in detaining any errant civilians, and without the cost of much effort. The Inuzuka loyalty had kept them in Hidden Leaf, too. They filled many of the top spots among the Hunter Nin. Indeed, they had prospered by joining in with the community. 3 Inuzuka had made small fortunes opening up public veterinary practices. The people of Konoha and Fire Country, not least the Fire Lord's wife, loved their animals. However, for every clan ninja working in Konoha, there were 5 or 6 non-clan ninja now. The head of Anbu, the top 3 in charge of the hospital, the Junin in charge of the academy, all non-clan. Since they'd reformed some of the older practices of the academy, namely, graduating 30 or so genin a year only to immediately fail 21 of them out of the shinobi lifestyle, claiming they were too old to rejoin the academy, they had a lot more ninjas to go around. The Hidden Leaf finally had the strength, in pure numbers if not talent, it had before the Kyuubi's attack. Sarutobi, over loud protest and several forced retirements, had declared that no Junin sensei would be permitted to test and fail out a team. Instead, they would all witness a common skills test held for all potential genin. The terrible practice of favoring clan members hadn't quite faded yet, but team compositions had shifted. There were no more 3 clan member teams and 3 nobody teams. That much the Hokage could ensure. The Hokage felt embarrassed at all those years of wasted shinobi. Potential genin who'd been forced into a civilian life or to enroll in the samurai training program in Fire City. That was a lot of wastage ended, so many potentially excellent shinobi tossed out after all those years of training. Sarutobi sat on a park bench and enjoyed the sun's warmth on his face. His head was covered with his special hat, but his eyes were fixed on the boy. He really looked like the Yondaime had when he was a boy. Over the years that boy grew and grew, like an out-of-control weed. Naruto was still a bit on the short side, but he made friends easily, it seemed, and enjoyed running, climbing trees, and causing chaos. This anonymity had served Naruto well. The villagers as a whole did not pay attention to the orphanage, and none of the spies who penetrated Konoha. Sarutobi didn't kid himself to think that infiltration didn't happen once a month or more often. even if they had tightened up security, would ever think to look in the new orphanage for the village's most precious military secret, the boy who saved them all every day from the Kyuubi. Naruto would start taking classes at the orphanage school in a few days, and would start at the ninja academy in 2 years. The orphanage school was much improved in the last 5 years. The visiting Chunin often helped manage field trips outside the village walls to look at trees and plants or try to walk local wildlife. Naruto would have a chance to learn reading and writing, math and bits of history and pride in the Fire Country. He'd be ready to attend the academy on time. The only thing that Sarutobi still wondered about was when Naruto should be told about his tenant. A part said just as soon as he started learning about chakra. If the Yondaime's seal worked as intended, and Jiraiya swore it would, the boy would have access to a massive store of chakra. Possibly, if he were trained correctly, an unlimited supply. Another part cautioned him to hold off on telling the boy for a while. Until he made genin at least. Sarutobi had already decided he would visit the boy personally, not just walk by or look at him in the park, when he began the academy. He had had a good life so far it seemed. Sarutobi could give him a few more years of comfort. Given that Sarutobi had begun taking a more active role in the academy the last few years, no one would think it odd for Sarutobi to visit with a few young students from time to time. The boy wasn't yet a hero to the village, as the only people who knew of the boy's sacrifice weren't telling, but he would be someday. Jiraiya had already stated he would be willing to train the boy in the future. Sarutobi was sure he would take to teaching the boy as well. Kami knew that the boy could become stronger than even the best Junin sensei could handle. Yes, that was settled. Sarutobi would take on a new student, one last student, and teach him all that he could, leadership along with the skills of a ninja. Strong in body, mind, and soul. The new generation had the will of fire, Sarutobi would ensure it. One could only hope they wouldn't have to have a heart of stone. But, if it came to it, Uzumaki Naruto would be trained in that as well. After all, Orochimaru was still out there with a few dozen sets of Uchiha eyes, and someone had killed and mutilated more than 100 Hyuga bodies. The world would be heating up in a few years, wouldn't it? Uzumaki Naruto would need everything Jiraiya, Sarutobi, and anyone else could teach him. Everything. The third Hokage smiled when he walked through the academy door. It had been more than a decade since he'd retaken his former position as Hokage, and today his predecessor's son was graduating. A bittersweet day, the best kind. Great sadness, intermingled with great hope. The dead could live on through their children, the legends that the young and alive would accumulate. Even this academy, nurturer of the young and alive, had risen from the proverbial grave. It was a different place from what Namikaze Minato would have remembered. It had more students, for one, and fewer students being dropped between the potential genin and genin stages. Junin sensei tests were abolished. Instead, all prospective graduates were tested in front of all prospective Junin sensei. No more sweeping shit under the rug. Students passed on their own merits, or failed for lack of merit. No Junin sensei could throw away a team for something nebulous, like lacking teamwork, after being together as a team for less than 24 hours. He also couldn't pass a team with 2 deadweights and 1 good genin in order not to fail that third member. Good riddance to bad practices. Also, as much as it had saddened Sarutobi, the academy now taught offensive and defensive techniques beyond hand-to-hand combat and distance projectiles. It had taken more than a few people pointing out how stupid it was for genin to be sent on missions without officially being required to know how to attack enemies or protect themselves. It made Sarutobi a bit sad to churn out so many child soldiers every year, but it was the way of the ninja. He wished they could have more time as children. He walked into the gymnasium and took a seat in the first row. All the prospective Junin sensei were here, even Kakashi. He'd required more than a few sessions with Ibiki to break him of his chronic tardiness. The Chunin instructors brought the 73 examinees into the room. Some of them had attempted to pass before, All of them looked nervous. 4 pairs would spar at a time in front of the panel. Every Junin would take notes, strengths and weaknesses, about every candidate. The losers of the first round would get to fight other losers, so every person would get to fight at least twice. Winners would fight winners. Everyone, even those in the losers bracket, who demonstrated acceptable skill would pass this test. Those who failed would have to try again next year. Sandaime smiled when Naruto took his turn against the young Inuzuka boy. Naruto remembered he was to use the standard academy style, not the one he and the Hokage had been developing for him to use. That style must only be used against true enemies, training dummies, or various types of bunshin. It was a straight taijutsu match. Naruto had speed, but the Inuzuka had a bit more strength and ferocity. There were no chakra attacks, no partner animals, so both were disadvantaged in some way. But, as Hokage, he had declared that every ninja had to be able to defend him or herself even when without a tool or partner or when ninjutsu or genjutsu weren't possible to use. If there were fundamental weaknesses in any candidate, they needed to be exposed early on and corrected, before those weaknesses got someone killed. Uzumaki Naruto, the anonymous little orphan, had been told of his unique heritage only 2 years earlier when the Hokage invited the young man to start weekly lessons with him. The boy was a powerhouse, rather reminiscent of a young Jiraiya, but with more laughter and less leering at the kunoichi in his class. Naruto finally flipped the Inuzuka into the air. The clan heir landed and had the breath knocked from him. That constituted a win in this spar, for Naruto. To everyone present, it looked like both boys had taken the academy lessons to heart. But the Hokage knew that he and his monkey summons had worked extensively with Naruto to build his physique and technique. After all, no 11-year-old likes to get beaten into the ground by a 2-foot-tall summoned monkey. Rather than continue to lose, he had learned and got better. And then Sandaime introduced Naruto to a stronger, 4-foot-tall monkey. His eyes turned to examine the other potential genin. The spars were good for the most part. Good speed, a bit of power, in all, a lot of potential waiting to be honed. The Sandaime was impressed with the entire cohort so far. Ordinarily when there were physical powerhouses like Naruto, the Inuzuka boy, or Hyuga Mishi, who would have been condemned to the branch house, had it survived, it could discourage others. It seemed this group took it as a challenge. In all, only 5 failed the taijutsu portion of the test, and all of them were first-time test takers. The Sandaime knew they'd do better next year, much better. The second rounds went well, but were shorter for the most part. The first round had seen the students going all out to win. Some of them had little left in reserve. Naruto did well again, and he wasn't even breathing hard. A few Junin sensei were going to have implement extensive physical conditioning to get some of these students into proper field condition. Oh well, it was a part of serving as a Junin. The Chunin overseeing this portion of the test began to speak, congratulating all the students and then dismissing those few who had failed. He began to explain the next test, words Sarutobi had undoubtedly heard a dozen times already. To Sarutobi's ears, it sounded of background droning. His mind, instead, returned to this school. All those horrible revelations about the academy had prompted change. As before, all prospective genin needed to demonstrate to the Chunin instructors their mastery over illusion clones, the replacement technique, and the disguise technique, but they did this to get their entry into this examination. Now, they also needed to show a few more combat-oriented techniques, which would be the next portion of the exam. The part that generated the most complaints from the students were the community service projects, formerly called D-ranked missions, that academy students were now responsible for completing. Walking dogs, buying groceries, delivering large quantities of letters for a civilian message service, and picking up trash weren't their idea of proper ninja work, but it was good team building and excellent community relations. For the civilians who lived in the Leaf, it was a chance to interact with ninja, to humanize them in their minds. Sarutobi ruled the Leaf as an absolute dictator, but he was not a cruel man. He wished for the civilians here to understand and honor their ninja protectors. On the matter of these complaints, Sarutobi did not believe that a requirement of 50 community service projects each year per student was unreasonable. It was only a mission every few days, and they were all completed in teams of academy students, to build teamwork skills, and, let's not kid ourselves, those funds derived from the paid missions helped to keep the academy in top condition. Poor Naruto, though, held the dubious records for the most times catching Tora the cat, along with the fastest time doing so. At least he wouldn't have to do so again once he became a genin, unless he wanted to pick up some spare change. The very idea made Sarutobi smile. Naruto and that silly cat. The second part of the exam began, the technique portion. Each prospective genin needed to show offensive and defensive techniques beyond the standard 3. The few clan members in the group could show off clan techniques. Some students proved how genjutsu could be used for defense, none of them had any mind techniques strong enough to be considered offensive. A small number used swords or other weapons as part of their demonstrations. Most used standard elemental techniques from the Academy Scroll Library. When it was Naruto's turn, the Sandaime watched closely. Naruto had developed quite a lethal arsenal, small so far, but very powerful. In taijutsu, he was a speed player, but in his ninjutsu, he was a power hitter. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. Remembrance. 1 year earlier. The Sandaime Hokage looked at his young pupil and wondered how he was going to fix this. He had spent a year wondering the same thing, how to give the boy control over his chakra. When the Sandaime first began giving Naruto a 1-hour lesson each week, he quickly realized that Naruto had tons of chakra, more than Sarutobi even at his peak of youthful vigor, but almost non-existent control. The standard control exercises, sticking leaves or bits of paper to one's body with chakra, climbing trees, and even water walking, did not do much for his control. He could climb a tree or a wall, but he expressed massive amounts of chakra to do it. 1 year of failed attempts at chakra control. Sure, the boy was learning taijutsu and other ninja skills, but Sarutobi could see that the boy would be a ninjutsu specialist. But only if they could get his control in line. As it was, Naruto couldn't produce a single illusion clone and had difficulty tamping down his chakra to perform the replacement technique. Stop. Go ahead and stop, Naruto, the Hokage called out. The young man stopped sparring against his monkey partner. He had obviously developed enough to handle a 4-foot monkey. He would introduce Naruto to a new sparring partner next week. Are we done then? The Hokage was about to say, yes, when an inspiration struck. A conversation a few weeks earlier replayed itself in the Hokage's mind. He'd said, no, then, but he decided he should try now. No, I have one more item. It won't take long at all, I suspect. He walked quickly into his home and found the item he was looking for. He picked it up with a pair of tweezers and hauled it back to Naruto. You want me to take notes or something, old man? Naruto was confused at the small piece of paper. No, this is a different sort of test, a chakra affinity test. I am surprised I didn't remember about this earlier. We've exhausted the conventional control exercises, but we haven't even started on the elemental ones. If you already show a strong affinity to one of the elements, then we have a clear path to try to get you some control. I get it. So I just touch the paper. Touch it and channel some chakra through your fingers, Naruto. The young man touched the paper and it immediately split into 2 pieces. Wind. How ironic. Maybe my son was right. I spoke over your situation with him a few weeks ago and he mentioned his own troubles mastering his chakra. Asuma said that his chakra control problems once he began, as a chunin, to work with elemental chakra. I said you were too young to try, but perhaps I was wrong. Alright, so what did that mean, old man? You're a wind user, Naruto. A wild chakra affinity, hard to master, but even harder to defeat a wind master. Alright, Sarutobi decided to modify the water walking exercise that day. We're out of time for the day, but here is your next assignment. You will stand above water. Start out with the water walking exercise and then raise a foot an inch. Begin to manipulate the air under your raised foot. Bring your other foot up. What? Yes. Get one foot standing on hardened air. Then get the other foot to do it as well. Sounds impossible. Who are you and what did you do with Naruto? He never says crap like that. The young man sighed and then nodded. I will figure it out. But, why do I have to start out over water? Because, when you fall, and you will fall a lot, you'll get wet. Consider it motivation. Old man, I'll do it, but I'm going to get you back for this. I promise. I've heard it before. Be on time next week, too. It was Konohamaru who stopped me in the house. He demanded that I teach him how to throw a kunai. The sandaime just nodded and sent the boy on his way. It took several weeks of the boy being completely soaked through before he was consistent standing above the water. It took a few more weeks to get him walking on the air, rather than the ground. The boy walked in for his next lesson, walking an inch off the ground as was now his standard practice. Indeed, Naruto rarely set foot on the earth. It looked like normal walking, but it wasn't. Naruto now left no footprints. As he practiced his chakra control every time he set foot out of his apartment, which comprised most of every day, as he was a terribly active young man, Naruto got 100 hours a week of control exercises. Did you practice with the cage bunshin technique I taught you last week? The Hokage asked. It was a reward for getting his chakra control problems in line. Yeah, it's pretty great, old man. I've got the henge working with the shadow clones, too. I left my shadow clones out yesterday in some of the training grounds disguised as rocks and stuff. You wouldn't believe what I heard out there. I'll be a great spymaster someday. Perhaps you will, perhaps. But on to new things. Hold up there, I have something else to show you. I was practicing the other day and I made a great kind of mistake. What were you practicing? Oh, well, I was working on the wind sword. The Hokage was silent for a moment. You have to stop sneaking into the shinobi archive, Naruto. You're not even a genin yet. I know, but the academy library doesn't have any cool jutsu, does it? Fine. What disaster did you cause? The Hokage asked, with a small smile on his face. Huh, disaster. No, it's awesome. Let me show you. Naruto formed up a wind blade, and then seemed to lose control of it. The blade held even as it shot through the air. A thin gash cut all the way through one of Sarutobi's fence posts. Nice, huh? We have training dummies for that, Naruto. You don't need to destroy parts of my home, but, yes, that was nice. I'll hold back my ideas for next time. Let us explore what you can do with these wind blades that you shouldn't know about. By the end of the hour, Naruto could form up directly manipulated air and send it shooting across the distance between him and a stone training post. The thin line cutting through a wooden post became a deep gouge and a number of radiating cracks on a heavy piece of stone. Considering the size of the stone, it was quite an accomplishment for a mistake. It was another 3 weeks before Naruto formed up multiple blades, all at different heights from the ground, and created the first version of his Finger of God. That name had given the Hokage fits. It's the kind of thing the god of shinobi would do when he wanted to flick a bug away, Naruto said while resting up from an attempt at demolishing a stone pillar. It's the Finger of God technique. Stop coming up with stupid names, Naruto. I like it. You helped me turn this into something, old man, so you get part of the credit. Whether you want it or not. Sarutobi had tried to get his student to be serious, but the name stuck. The boy began naming all his techniques after the god of shinobi. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. Return to the present. There, in front of the audience of Chunin, Junin and Hokage, Naruto made 10 shadow clones, a true show of force. The Junin who knew the technique, not all of them had reserves allowing them to safely use shadow clones, were deeply impressed. The young ninja standing in the auditorium turned toward one of the training logs set up for demonstrations. He made some odd, unfamiliar hand seals, and 4 almost invisible chakra blades formed in front of Naruto and then propelled themselves into the log. It was an improvement over the original technique, but Naruto still called it the finger of God. The bottom of the training stump remained. A few bits of the top were in large chunks. But the vast majority of the log was little better than sawdust now. Such a strange, unknown technique got a few Junin talking. Sarutobi waved them silent. The test continued. Naruto had obviously passed, as did almost everyone else. Only 7 more failed here. A very good result. Some years more than half the prospective genin failed this part. Many selected techniques too difficult for their developing skills, and refused to select more appropriate skills when advised by their Chunin instructors. It was a ninja's right to fail, after all, in any rank examination. The Chunin couldn't force them to make better selections, and students who refused to take advice didn't deserve to be genins. The boring Chunin stood up again and explained the final portion. Sarutobi was willing to leave the room at this point, but a ritual was a ritual. This was a test of applied stealth. Each prospective genin was told the location of their Hiite and given 5 minutes to arrive there undetected by the Chunin patrolling the halls. If they arrived, and the Chunin were going fairly easy on their pupils, they passed. It wasn't a well-designed test, Sarutobi knew, rather it was a simplistic rite of passage. Still, the symbolism was important. Knowing how to survive in a dangerous world was a prerequisite for work outside the village walls. Only 2 pupils failed. It was a very good crop. As Naruto left the gymnasium, he tipped his head to Sarutobi-sensei. He also bounced a bit more than usual as he inflated and deflated the small controlled air pockets he kept between his feet and the ground. The Hokage just smiled at the small acknowledgement. Once the new genin left, the Sandaime gestured to the side of the gymnasium and the Chunin instructors led the way. The next phase was about to begin. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. The next door classroom had been set up to serve as a conference area. The prospective Junin sensei squabbled a bit over chairs and who would sit next to whom before the Hokage took his seat to begin the bidding process. Well, with the genin from previous cohorts who need to be reassigned teams, we have a total of 81 genin to assign. I'll assume you have each written down your bid, specifically the proposed specialization of the team, if any, plus 6 or 8 names of students you might like to teach. The Sandaime looked around. All the Junin had been through this. A few new Chunin hadn't, but they hid their ignorance well. They were only there to offer advice anyway, or their thoughts on the new genin. Let's start with support-type teams. Medical teams and the like. 3 Junin raised their hands and the bidding started there. These Junin knew who possessed the best chakra control in this group of genin. Sarutobi nodded when the teams came together. He marked it all down on a scroll in front of him. Anyone wishing to put together tracking teams? A few hands went up. The Junin presented their lists, and the teams got put together quickly. The Inuzuka quickly got snatched up by the former head of the Hunter Nins. How about infiltration or information retrieval teams? A small number of Junin indicated that they wished to pass on their skills in this way. 3 new teams were settled quickly. Sandaime knew it was the next few categories that caused conflicts. Trackers were usually different from infiltrators. And none of those were usually best qualified for medic roles. However, heavy combat teams, stealth and assassination teams, and generalists often drew on the same types of people. How about stealth or assassination type teams? Only 2 hands rose up. Mitarashi Anko always wanted to start an assassination team, but her methods were a bit brutal, a bit like the former sensei she loathed so much. With the right people, she could be effective, but her last 3 students were up for reassignment, at their request, in this meeting. Anko, given what happened with your last team, you will be allowed to structure a generalist team. You will not use snakes at any point during training, nor will you intentionally wound any of your genin. Do you understand me? She looked pissed, but she lowered her hand. The other Junin got his first choice. Alright, time for the fights. Heavy combat types. 6 Junin raised their hands. And when they read off their lists, there was a lot of overlap. A lot. Naruto, for example, was on all 6 lists. The boy had shown off his shadow clone, and finger of god techniques. Sarutobi Asuma, a wind user, one of the few in Konoha, seemed to recognize that the boy was already using elemental chakra, and wanted him without explaining precisely why. Sarutobi could read his brilliant, lazy son like an open book, however. Mitarashi Anko wanted him, too. Her reason, she muttered, cause he seems to like to blow shit up. But it was said loud enough that Sarutobi heard it. Naruto would be an excellent demolitionist, but he was so much more. The other Junin expressed their reasons. It was getting ridiculous. Sandame blinked twice. Hold on. Before the brawling starts, how many of the remaining Junin had Uzumaki Naruto, Nara Shikamaru, Ko Moegi, the top Kunoichi, or either of the 2 Hyuga? Almost everyone's hand went up. Sandame quickly went through and figured out how many wanted each of the remaining genin. A few teams were simple to put together. Yuahi Kurenai, Genjutsu Mistress, had picked out the best of those who demonstrated Genjutsu. Her team was to be an experiment in ensuring that everyone had complementary skills, Genjutsu, supplemented by individuals strong in Nin, Tai, or Kenjutsu. But Naruto, the 2 Hyuga, and the Nara boy were hard to place. It was frustrating that, save for Naruto, Junin still competed for clan children. Bah, if only they knew Naruto's true heritage, they'd be salivating even more. Son of the Yondaime, container of a demon with never-ending chakra, a wind user with almost unparalleled potential. Finally, as day finally succumbed to night, the bidding was over. The teams were made. Most of the Junin were disappointed not to get their first choices but happy enough overall. Compromise, after all, was tough to live with. The trick was to let people get what they wanted, while also ensuring that the teams were balanced, and that the right sensei was in charge of each team. Not only to teach what he or she knew to the newly formed teams, but to fix the holes and weaknesses in their specific students' training regimens. A few of the Junin in this crew were almost out of chances since they weren't natural teachers and weren't improving on their methods of instruction. Mitarashi Anko was at the top of that list, actually. It really would be best if all Junin took a stint at the academy when they were Chunin, perhaps it should be a new requirement. After all, aside from direct combat and running missions, a Junin's most important task was teaching and mentoring. Those with superior skills had to adequately pass them on to the next generation. Food for thought, Sandame mused as he walked from the room with the scroll listing the teams in his hand. Konoha was becoming more and more like the place Yondaime always dreamed it could be. The traitors inside the walls had been gone for a long time, or at least as many as could be found. But peace doesn't last. Sandame realized that the enemies outside these walls would be regrouping. His greatest failure, his student Orochimaru, was likely plotting something horrifying, and Iwa still resented its loss in the last war, and Kumo, who knew what they were up to. Jiraiya and the other spymasters would be in his office tomorrow for the intelligence briefing. He'd hear more about the threats soon. Tonight, a bit of sake and an early bedtime. Old bones were tired bones, after all. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. Uchiha Itachi, the last of his clan, was known in Tea Country as Baguru the Hunter. He had left the site of his parents' murder all those years ago with almost nothing. The clothing on his back, a few kunai, and no money. As an ordinary boy, he was unable to get a job. As an Uchiha, he was unable to ask for help or accept a place in a state orphanage. As an Avenger, he was unable to do anything but keep his body in shape and continuously improve his skills. Hence, Itachi had become a hunter. At age 8, he cleaned out several caches of bandits in Lightning Country. At age 10, he hunted Nukenin with moderate bounties in Earth Country. At age 13, he had blundered into a situation with an A-rank Nukenin from Hidden Mist. Itachi walked away with several heads, those he targeted and the one he didn't expect. Now, at age 17, he was in T Country, in a small village far away from where any Nukenin might willingly go. It was where he came to heal after injuries and where he came to train in jutsu scrolls he stole from his targets, and other targets of opportunity. Itachi had the most powerful technique known to the Uchiha, the Mangekyo Sharingan, but his first usage of it had scared him, bleeding from his eyes. He used his Sharingan eyes only when an opponent proved challenging, worthy of being viewed through his special eyes, or when there was a technique of such brilliance he had to learn it. The rabble died with one of the nearly 400 techniques he knew, that he'd stolen from ninja before he killed them. He had no way of knowing if he was powerful enough yet, but his goal had never wavered, Orochimaru's death. He'd finally learned the name of the ninja who rode on snakes 3 years ago. Finding the man to challenge him was difficult, which is why Itachi was still alive. At the age of 14, Orochimaru would have batted Itachi away and fed him to a snake. But now Itachi was closer to his goal. His last battle, one conducted in the deserts of Wind Country, gave him hope. His targets were a team of 3 Nukenin, 2 from grass and 1 from waterfall. When he caught up to them, they were dead. A squat, massive man stood over their bodies searching for something. "You stole the kill from me," Itachi had said. The ninja said nothing, but a massive tail made from metal streaked out, and thudded into a kunai Itachi pulled out. This man was worthy of the Mangekyo Sharingan. It glowed to life and began spinning inside his otherwise black pupil-less eyes. The ninja had twisted around by this time. The sight of the eyes had stilled him. "You, Uchiha, you will be coming with me. I know someone who will be very interested in." "I think not." His eyes shot out black fire. It was hot enough to burn even metal. Then the whole man went up in flames. A hatch opened, and a smaller man, an odd sort of man, leapt out and away from the flames. "What sort of trickery is this?" Itachi asked, not expecting the answer. He had never seen such a thing, having never spent much time in this part of the world. The enemy ninja's response had been a flamethrower, somehow mounted in his arm. What kind of butchery was that? Still, Uchiha Itachi, a master of fire techniques, was not impressed. He countered with his own flame breath technique. The flamethrower was just slightly less powerful than his flame breath. It was a powerful machine. Itachi rolled out of the way and closely observed the man. It seemed like filaments of chakra were emerging from his body in all directions. Something was happening. Itachi flickered away. The spot where he was came under attack by a mist of black-looking sand. That technique he had heard of. One of the Kazekage had used that, the one who had disappeared all those years ago. He had disappeared and gone to work with this odd ninja. The black sand danced every way. Itachi's could see every grain and predict what it would do. It also noticed an oddity about the black-cloaked ninja. He carried something on his chest. Armor. A weapon. He threw a kunai and the ninja danced away, but not quite fast enough. It tore through the cloak, leaving the ninja's chest bare. There really was an odd thing on that man's chest. His hands flew into familiar seals, and a fire flame dragon burst from Itachi's mouth. The moment it was out, Itachi was moving, using the fire as cover. He advanced 3 meters by the time the ninja dodged it. The black sand blasted through the area where Itachi had last stood. It didn't matter. A kunai went through the odd canister in the man's chest. From his back, the sharp blade pierced through to his chest. The Kazekage dropped to the ground, like his strings had been cut. Like a puppet. Itachi finally realized. He had heard rumors a few years back about puppeteers in this part of the world. Still behind the ninja, he calmly asked, "What was your name?" "For one who killed me, no, I am called Sasori. Akasuna no Sasori. You fought well." It was Itachi's highest compliment. Every powerful ninja he killed got him closer to Orochimaru. When he'd left, Itachi had carried away the whole body, plus the cage, plus the heads of the targets he had been chasing. He didn't head straight back to claim his bounties in grass and waterfall. No, he went further into the desert, to hidden sand. The looks of fear, awe, and calculation he received after turning in this Sasori and the body of their third cage were unnerving. But he accepted the massive bounties, did not dispute that he had just killed an S-rank ninja, and fled the village in the night. He dropped the name he'd been using, and changed out his clothing for a completely new style. Itachi knew it wouldn't be long now. That ninja, Sasori, had fought Itachi, once he saw Sharingan eyes, not to kill, but to capture. Itachi fought to kill, a much easier proposition. Eventually Itachi wouldn't fight to kill, but to avenge, the highest calling he knew of. He was improving. He had only 4 battles this last year that required his Sharingan, and he'd copied another 17 interesting jutsu when he infiltrated various villages. For the most part, he was getting stronger by his own accomplishment. When Orochimaru died, Itachi wouldn't honor that man with even a glimpse of his Sharingan eyes. He would be strong enough that he wouldn't need the Sharingan at all. Orochimaru would never know why he died. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. The informal spy council gathered in Sarutobi's office at 7:30 in the morning, long before Jiraiya usually woke up to start peeping. But, like with Kakashi, Sarutobi did not permit any tardiness from any of his ninja. Konoha had long neglected spying on its enemies and allies. Jiraiya had done some work on his own during his travels, but he was mainly focused on news about Orochimaru. Only in the last 3 to 4 years had this handful of people finally gotten several independent networks going, focused on all threats, foreign and domestic. Jiraiya, Yamakoto, and Famata ran external fixed contact networks, which meant they had spies in the various hidden villages and in other parts of the elemental countries. Using various means, Jiraiya used his toad summons to collect and forward reports. They collected all the publicly available information. Who had fallen out with whom, details about crop harvests, industrial capacity, and all sorts of other boring things that could eventually mean a lot. Some of their spies also had access to more classified information which they passed along when they could safely do so. For example, the news that the Raikage's cousin, and likely successor, had been debilitated while developing a new lightning jutsu. The political winds had shifted there as a result. The pacifist successor candidate was out and the new one hadn't been made public yet. The intelligence gathering inside Fire Country required more direct resources. One member of Ibiki's Anbu department supervised the capture and interrogation of missing ninjas who ventured into Fire Country. Given that Hidden Leaf had more than 200 active genin teams, plus 2,300 chunin, and another 900 Junin-level ninja, Fire Country was filled with ninja paying attention to the coming and going of everyone. Most properly motivated missing nin would reveal a lot about their former homes, and other places they'd visited. Not everything would be true, but it could be used to verify or confirm other intelligence. A retired shinobi named Mata ran the small group that tracked and monitored merchants passing through Konoha. Trade patterns were a very useful method for verifying upcoming intelligence trends. Merchants who'd suddenly stopped going to rain sent up a red flag that something bad was happening there. The other 3 people in the room were active Anbu operatives and in full masks. Each of them ran programs to root out spies within Hidden Leaf. Orochimaru had managed to place a surprising number here, as had many other hidden villages. Jiraiya called this meeting, the Sandaime said, as soon as he walked in the door. Let's start with his update. The Toad Sage nodded, looking rather upset. It's taken a decade but I've finally figured out where Orochimaru is. Sandaime, among others, leaned forward in frustrated curiosity. He founded a hidden village in Rice Country. I've heard that it's called Sound. Kumo seems to be a sponsor of some sort. The grumbling was quite loud. This wasn't the tonnage of vegetables produced in Hidden Waterfall and trying to guess what it might mean for the future. This was real, valuable intelligence. The question, though, was what to do with it. Sandame asked the first question. This information is verified. I have pictures of one of the installations. Orochimaru was there. One of the counter-espionage heads said, "We have been tracking a seeming genin named Kabuto. He's the adopted son of the head of Konoha Hospital. He's also been to Rice Country on 4 missions in the last 8 months. And we've only had 4 missions to Rice Country in that time, right?" Jiraiya asked. A nod was the only reply. The group focused on counter-espionage knew what this likely meant. "Who is this Kabuto's Junin sensei?" Atakagi Mew, replied the counter-espionage specialist. "Investigate him and the other teammates. Do a careful review of the hospital administrator. Let's have a discreet surveillance started as well," Sandame said. "It's awful that the more we look the more we find." The torture Anbu said, "Why would he build a hidden village? What does he want?" Jiraiya made to speak, but Sarutobi held up his hand. "He wants people to experiment upon, and another way to power, and perhaps a platform for attacking us," Sandame said. "I have spent a decade thinking on him, on my mistakes. We must strike him in a way he won't be able to predict." The meeting continued for another hour with the more ordinary reports. It gave the Sandame a lot to consider. Konoha's enemies outside its walls were getting stronger. Their wrath would come eventually. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. That Sunday afternoon was quite sunny, and Naruto had too much energy, as usual. "Stop bouncing, boy," the Sandame said to his student. "Yes, sensei." He was still bouncing on the controlled air pocket underneath his feet. Even during training, Naruto knew to keep developing his chakra control. He would never be able to train as a medic nin or genjutsu specialist, but he was getting quite adept with wide area techniques. "You made genin and will have a great Junin sensei in Yamanaka Inoichi. I know. He seems like he knows a lot." Sarutobi had a slight scowl now. Naruto was still bouncing. He served in the Anbu for many years. He's a master of the mind, but his teams are very strong, very physical. He has trained 3 great teams now. You will do well too. Naruto, stop bouncing. I'm too excited. I'm a genin. My first mission will begin tomorrow. Fine. You want to bounce. I'll beat it out of you. Sarutobi made a number of hand seals and slammed his blooded hand to the earth. A 5-foot-tall monkey appeared in a plume of smoke. "Honored Sarutobi, how may I assist you? My student here needs a sparring partner. Show him a few things." "It would be my pleasure," the monkey said, bowing. Then he turned to Naruto, and withdrew a bow, or staff weapon, from out of nowhere. Naruto barely ducked the first blow, and was hit by the second. The monkey was a bit taller than Naruto, but it hit a lot harder than Naruto could. The young ninja didn't cry out. No, he seemed to bite his tongue and get into the sparring. 10 minutes later, a bleeding Naruto lay on the ground, smiling a bit but no longer bouncing. "Is that out of your system?" Sarutobi asked his student. "Yes, old man." For as battered as he wasn't even out of breath. Sarutobi smiled at his summon and thanked him, dismissing him. "Well, shall we finally get down to work? How am I ever going to beat him?" Naruto asked absently as he got back to his feet. Sarutobi laughed. "Yes, Mirami is a tough one. But you said much the same thing when you first met Kiki, and again when you were bested by Todai. Remember, though, after Mirami there are several more, until you must finally learn to fight the Monkey King." Really? For some odd reason, that perked Naruto right back up. A strange boy, but an interesting one. "If you start bouncing again, I'll introduce you today." Both my teachers were surprised when they met Enma. He could fight them hand to hand at the same time, and he was as old then as I am now. "He's an antique then, sensei." Sarutobi didn't rise to the bait. "Naruto, show me this new technique." "Yes, sensei." The young genin didn't bother with his mystifying fake seals in front of his sensei. All that he had been developing relied upon direct manipulation of air chakra. It was as if the air wanted to respond to him, like he was a magnet commanding metal filings wherever and however he wanted. Sarutobi watched the tiny signs that wind chakra was forming up. Slight rippling distortions, it seemed like the finger of God all over again. How was this different? Then the earth exploded in front of Sarutobi. Quite a bit pelted his clothing and landed in his hair, now that he wasn't wearing his ceremonial hat. A deep, circular trench formed in his once whole training ground. What? Naruto, how did you use wind chakra to do this? And how have you been practicing without the Anbu noticing? The blonde boy smiled. Well, sensei, the fist of God is a whole bunch of wind blades, in a circle around my target. Then I send them at the target, wave after wave, at an angle. The air only goes in so far, but then the next blade goes in further. And then, finally, it looks like a giant's angry fist smashed down into the earth. Sarutobi nodded. That it does. Now, where have you practiced this technique? Naruto fidgeted a bit and then mumbled. Excuse me, speak more clearly. I said, I went into the forest of death, just the very outside part. That could have been a disaster, the Hokage realized. It wouldn't do at all for Naruto to be injured just so he could have some privacy to develop a technique. Not again, do you understand? Not there. I will find some place private and safe. At our next meeting, I will have an answer for you. Thank you, sensei. I am just amazed, Naruto. It felt like a strange Earth-style technique, or maybe someone burying exploding notes underground. I wonder, what do you expect to do with this technique? Naruto got a bit bashful here. He seemed so old with the other students, and so young when he was alone with the Hokage. The Sandaime wondered which, if either, was the true Naruto. I didn't have a purpose when I tried it, but it'd be awesome for making a trench or taking out a powerful, slow-moving enemy, or, I guess I could make a swimming pool if I ever get a house. The Sandaime bopped Naruto on the head with his pipe. Be serious. We only have a few minutes left today. Yes, sensei. Now that I think about it, this could be a useful technique. Next week we will go to a spot more receptive to being blown up. We shall experiment a bit. Until then, Naruto, no more work on this. I think it is time you learn a few more defensive techniques, right? Your arsenal leans pretty heavy towards kill everything now. That's true, sensei, Naruto said, proud as could be. Now then, you will work on an earth-style and a water-style defense. That should give you a nice challenge after spending so much effort on the wind. Pick two that seem interesting from the Shinobi archive. I know you know your way around the place, since you've been sneaking in for 2 years. Go in through the front door this time, right? I will. Sarutobi gestured the young ninja away, while he lapsed into thought. He was thought of as the strongest ninja in the village, and likely still was, but he had always seen himself as a teacher, up until the Nadaime's death. It felt good to teach again. In the past, he'd just spoken with his ninja about their experiments and offered a few hints here and there. Like with Kakashi, he'd seemed perfectly content with his Chidori as it was, but the Sandaime had pushed him a bit and asked him several questions Kakashi couldn't answer. Last the Hokage had heard, Kakashi was working on his Chidori again. That made Hokage glad. After all, a complacent ninja was a dead ninja. But, while little bits of mentoring like that were nice, teaching more actively made him feel young again. Happy. Why had he waited for so long to try this? Then he remembered the face of a pale genius of a ninja. A twisted man that Sarutobi had helped become powerful, to everyone's detriment. Naruto wasn't Orochimaru, though. He was the will of fire personified, with a smiling, goofy, undignified face. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. Hinata remembered her name. She remembered the face, but not the name, of her mother. She knew she had a younger sister, but could not remember what she looked like. Her father seemed a distant blur in her memory. For the last 7 years, she had lived in this strange building. Her guardians were curt, but they did not hurt her. Until that day when they took her into a cold room she had never seen before. She was made to undress and her feet were placed in cold metal socks, or something. Then a woman doctor parted her legs and locked them into place while she examined her, down there. The doctor had pushed something inside her. Hinata had been made to stay in that uncomfortable position for hours. Then she'd redressed and been given dessert for dinner that night. 4 months later she had become fat. When she asked her guardians if she was eating too much, she was told she would be having a baby. A baby? How would she have a baby? They did not explain. They did not tell her how long it would be, or that it would hurt, or that once she had her baby she would never get to see him again. Now she was pregnant again. Her belly was fat. She remembered that she was 12 years old now, and her name was Hinata. But, beyond that, she didn't know anything. But she didn't want to have a baby again and not be able to see him or her. She needed to do something besides cry. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. The Sandaime enjoyed many parts of his job, especially watching the young shinobi grow stronger. The young Inuzuka boy had grown by leaps and bounds once he got away from books and began doing practical missions. Naruto, well, he was a genius of hard work. Had the Sandaime had the sorts of chakra control problems and such in his past that Naruto once did, it was unclear whether he'd have grown as strong as he did. But, Naruto was becoming a ninja worthy of praise. Less worthy of praise, however, was politics. The Hokage had never loved the political parts of his job, such as meeting with the fire daimyo. Since the council had been dissolved, the man came himself once or twice a year to review the hidden village. Within Fire Country, they were equals under the law. But, the daimyo knew he could throw a samurai army against the Hokage and still lose. The hidden village had power, and both sides knew it. The daimyo, a retired samurai, needed to keep good relations with the ninja leader. This was one of those trips. The Sandaime stood as the daimyo entered his office, greeting the shorter, heavier man as an equal. The Hokages flicked down to the mission summary on his desk. He'd been keeping tabs on Naruto again. Normally a C-rank mission report wouldn't even touch his desk. But, the Sandaime had asked Inoichi for a personal copy of each report. Naruto was coming along nicely. So far it seemed that Sandaime had picked the right sensei for the boy. Yamanaka Inoichi was a taskmaster, a perfectionist, and the almost exact opposite of Naruto, when on a mission. It was good for Naruto to learn from someone who wouldn't put up with his antics, as the Sandaime often did. Discipline wasn't one of the things that the Sandaime excelled in teaching, unfortunately. How have you been, Daimyo-sama? Well, very well. Now that that business in Wave is done with, I have many fewer problems. The daimyo apparently wanted that kind of a conversation. He was here to extract secret information. I understand. Trade is the lifeblood of a nation, is it not? It was a good thing you did. A team of 4 Junin to clean up that Gato mess. Of course, the daimyo's spies had found this out. The ninja Sarutobi sent to deal with the Gato Corporation hadn't used cover names. It wasn't client requested, of course, but it will pay for itself. Wave used to be a very good customer up until a few years ago, then that moron moved in. With our good neighbor policy, we had to take action. And, of course, you'll never comment on what happened to the billions Gato was rumored to have. Sandaime smiled. He hammed up being very old, infirm, and deaf. Excuse me, sir, but you'll have to speak up. My great old age has robbed me of my hearing. Fine, then, I'll just have to lop off a chunk of funding in honor of your windfall. The joking threat meant nothing to Konoha. Less than 2% of Konoha's budget came from the daimyo's largesse. Indeed, since he had formed an illicit wealth retrieval team, 7 years, one that stole money from bandits, yakuza, thieves, and the very wealthy who chose to live outside Fire Country, he had no problem balancing his budget. If you need the money for other projects, Daimyo-sama, feel free. We've been completely profitable for 7 years laying aside your subsidy, but not the fees for the missions we perform for you. The heavy-set man nodded, a bit weary. I think I knew that. Having a bit of a reserve in case of trouble is a smart idea. The man was trying to get an idea of how much Konoha was sitting on. Sarutobi wasn't about to speak on that topic. We will likely be coming up against some difficulties soon, I fear. The rumors are flying about old alliances falling apart, and new ones coming together. A bunch of the weak coming to attack the strongest. Sandaime nodded. Ever since we assassinated the Mizukage, unofficially, of course, and stopped that awful civil war, other hidden villages have been leery of us. You've also dealt with the thugs in Water, Wave, and 5 other countries. That Gato fellow, Kurokan the arms manufacturer, and Yanzo of Yanzo Pharmaceuticals, the largest drug kingpin of his time. Ought to send some shivers down some backs. The daimyo's spies had obviously uncovered less than 10% of the Hokage's recent, wealth retrieval, activities. The list was much longer and more star-studded than these. It was inevitable. But we couldn't be strong when our borders were so weak. The daimyo nodded and reached for a cup of tea. I won't ask for details. I do understand security concerns, after all. But I was curious if you'd heard anything from your friends in Hidden Rain. I haven't heard from their daimyo in some time either, even though he is supposed to host the next Chunin examination. And I've not gotten a letter from their military head for some time. Sandaime shook his head. I have not heard from Hanzo in quite some time. He's nearly as old as I am, and even gave my students the title of the legendary 3 ninja. We have heard about disruptions in merchants coming and going. And that is often the first we know about a civil war, the daimyo said. I will snoop around with the other daimyos and see if anyone else is willing to have their country host the examinations. Much appreciated. The conversation continued for another hour on lighter topics, but Sandaime was more concerned than ever about Hidden Rain. XXXXXXXXXX. 1 month after the Fire Daimyo's visit, Sandaime got a coded letter, and the implications were not good. Sandaime pointed to the Anbu stationed in his office. Please find me Jiraiya. He should be within a day's walk by now, but I need to move up our meeting. The badger-faced Anbu nodded and quickly left the room. It was that afternoon when he was able to convene his spy council once more. The Fire Daimyo has basically been forced by the Wind and Lightning Daimyos into hosting the Chunin exam. But it's not our turn in the rotation, Jiraiya said. Precisely why I called this meeting. Hidden Rain is out of contact and unable to meet its obligation. Instead of heading to the next village in the rotation, 2 daimyos who positively hate each other have banded together, possibly at the request of the Kazekage and the Raikage, and asked the Fire Daimyo something strange. Odd things that rarely happen, are happening. Sarutobi did not like this one bit. People are looking for a reason to have lots of foreigners in Konoha. Spy missions are worse, said Jiraiya's colleague Famata. I have not heard anything about this yet, but in the weeks to come I may. And if you don't, Jiraiya said, then your network and mine might be compromised. I've discovered one purveyor of misinformation already. Seems Orochimaru knew what to look for when setting up his own counter-espionage operations. That would give us less than 9 months to figure out what this means and prepare for the unknown, Sandaime said. I don't like it. I don't like risking the village and the 25,000 mostly defenseless civilians here, plus our ninja forces, just to see what Orochimaru and his allies are up to. One of the counter-espionage agents finished reading the letter and passed it along. I should report that the Anbu watching the genin called Kabuto were attacked. 1 died and 2 are badly wounded. Damn, Jiraiya said. Orochimaru must have cracked some of my codes. I was having an agent discreetly ask around about this Kabuto. He had spent a good deal of time in hidden sand at one point. I will send the paperwork to have him declared enemy of the state, the Hokage said. It was a far more dire designation than just missing nin. It was used for infiltrators and betrayers, people who deserved no trial and should be killed in the field. The room fell silent while the rest read the daimyo's letter. A few began talking quietly about the situation while most of them just tried to digest what all this might mean. Eventually Jiraiya got a smile on his face. Village hidden in the leaves, he said. Sandaime looked at his former student with impatience. Yes, that's where we are. No, that's what we're called. But we're not actually very hidden. Hidden Waterfall has its entrance hidden by a waterfall. Hidden Cloud is so high up in the mountains that usually clouds obscure the view. In comparison, we're just sitting out in plain sight. We can't hide the village, someone muttered. We can and we will, Jiraiya said. We have someone with the transplanted Mokudan bloodline. We can make the forest more dense, change the roads leading in and out of Hidden Leaf, but make sure that they reach a decoy of a town, a second Konoha, the one that will be attacked. How would that work? The maps of Fire Country show the roads very clearly, Famata said. We will have to stage something that makes our changes plausible. A natural disaster, perhaps a large-scale forest fire. But how do you fake a new Hokage monument? It's impossible, asked one of the masked Anbu. We grow a new mountain if we need to. We will protect this village. Sandaime looked worried and interested at the same time. It will be difficult to keep a secret like that from tens of thousands of civilians who expect to be able to leave the village whenever they wish, plus many thousand shinobi. Hey, the idea just occurred to me. I didn't say it was perfect or that it would be easy. The room fell into silence. It was an appealing idea on many levels. A trap designed to destroy the enemy and leave Konoha proper out of harm's way. Conceptually elegant, it would be very challenging to pull off. This meeting drug on long into the night before a consensus was finally reached. XXXXXXXXXXXXXX. 9 months later, the Cage had a big smile on his normally grim face when he finally sighted Konoha. It had been a long, dry trip from Suna, twice as long as the journey from Odo to Konoha, but he had to keep up appearances lest he tip his hand to what he'd done to the real Cage. He had enjoyed chasing and nearly capturing the third-year Genin Uchiha Momoru, one of the very last Uchiha. Sure, he'd slaughtered the rest of the clan himself, all to gain their very special copying eyes. Possessing their eyes, as Orochimaru now did, wasn't as useful as he'd hoped. Many of them were ruined because of poor extraction. What few were appropriate had to travel a long distance between where they were harvested and where they could be implanted in Orochimaru's experiments. He'd wound up with only a single transplant, and that host was supremely weak. Sickly, barely able to leave the restricted hospital ward. Too bad most orphans contract diseases that damage them for life. Orochimaru wasn't willing to live in a weak host, not even for the Sharingan. Unfortunately, his hunt in that dense pocket of forest for Momoru had gone south when 3 teams of Anbu showed up. It seemed his former sensei Sarutobi wasn't as senile as was generally believed. It hadn't taken him long to understand that the Anbu had been monitoring chakra output throughout the forest. Orochimaru's summonings of snakes and other high-level jutsu had stuck out like a sore thumb. No matter. He would get his chance to gift Uchiha Momoru with the cursed seal in time. He walked through the streets and thought that Konoha had really gone all out. This place probably hadn't looked this clean since the Shidaime Hokage built the place in one night. The streets, the walls, everything, immaculate. The Genin teams had likely been doing cleaning missions for months inside the village. Oh, right, it was now academy students who did such work. His spies were nothing if not thorough. Konoha had really gone to some trouble. Outside the walls they'd even fixed up the former pathway, and had someone grow in some new trees, extra massive and imposing. Who knew who they were trying to impress, but the town would be in cinders in a few short hours. The Cage looked around and was able to see where the wall had been destroyed during the massive earthquakes preceding the Kyuubi attack more than a decade earlier. The wall looked strong, but a failed section, even repaired by the best, was always a weakness. Suna would attack from outside through that segment of wall. The massive snake summons would create a second front in another part of the village. His backers from Hidden Cloud had declined to attack Hidden Leaf directly, but they were setting up a cordon 10 miles out to keep anyone from escaping or any reinforcements from getting in. It would be the most lovely sort of slaughter. He licked his lips in anticipation. His former sensei dead, for depriving him of the hidden leaf he deserved to rule. The villagers slaughtered, the buildings on fire and in ruins, all the ninja of the most powerful ninja force around killed. 3 armies with a combined force of 10,000 could always defeat one army with perhaps 5,000. Simple mathematics, plus Orochimaru had surprise on his side. He looked around as his disguised sound ninja waited patiently to pass through ineffective security screenings. Some posed as merchants wishing to trade, others as ninja from grass or other hidden villages wishing to see the tournament, others as wishing to visit people who lived in Hidden Leaf. The army from Sand was gathering, the army from Cloud would begin the land blockade in 2 hours. There would be no survivors. After getting settled into the arena 30 minutes before the tournament began, the Cage was joined by his former mentor, Sarutobi. The two chatted briefly. The arena filled up rapidly once the doors to the general public opened. Orochimaru's sound ninja made up probably 10 or 20% of the audience. It was hard to tell as general tickets were sold by lottery. The first matches began as an odd ninja named Rock Lee went up against one of Sound's best genin, Dosu. The green-clad ninja pounded the ever-loving Kami out of Dosu. He just wouldn't stay put long enough for a Sound attack to work against him. Too bad this Rock Lee would soon be dead. Speed like that wasn't something many ninja ever developed. Orochimaru watched and gloated but never thought about his men outside. His sound ninja, disguised in many different ways, found a few dozen impenetrable barriers throughout the city. These checkpoints were definitely not on their maps. "Excuse me, my friend lives 4 blocks down that way," a disguised ninja said. The guard shook his head. "Sorry. We had an assassination attempt on the Hokage last night. We didn't have enough time to postpone the Chunin exam finals, otherwise the whole village would be locked down." The sound ninja was rather nervous. It felt like someone had tipped their hand. Not good at all. Who would do such a thing? Rumor is the assassin was from Iowa. The sound ninja nodded and hoped that this unexpected interference wouldn't screw things up too badly. "Can I at least get a message through so my friend will come and meet me?" "You can use a telephone. That hotel over there has some on the ground floor." "Thank you." Of course, the sound ninja's friend didn't exist, except as a convenient excuse for getting close to one of Hidden Leaf's armories and destroying it at the proper time. Back in the stadium, Orochimaru leaned over and said, "This Kunoichi is better than I would have expected." She was a rookie genin. Sandame Hokage just smiled and nodded. "She's quite good. Much has changed since I was last here. Indeed, even the road paths and such seem different." The Hokage nodded. "We had a dry summer and then a series of lightning storms. We lost almost 70 acres of our forest, so we had to reroute the roads while we extinguished the fires. We haven't bothered to repair the old destroyed roads yet. It was touch and go for a while. The flames got within a few hundred meters of the northern walls." "I see. Plus a different route is better for security anyway. Should have done that years ago. In Suna, we have no trees to hide behind. But it's probably easier to hide in the sand, especially with the powerful wind users you possess." The Cage just nodded. Gaara's match was approaching. That would set off the whole thing. The wait was delicious torture. Gaara arrived on the arena floor and began tearing into his opponent, a nobody named Uzumaki. The only thing was that Gaara wasn't doing any damage to the boy. The boy had managed to block a variety of attacks, and even harm the Sand Jinchuriki, but he had taken no damage himself. What sort of ninja was this boy? Even Orochimaru would have a tough time dealing with that sand. His intelligence network back into his old home had kept many things from him, it seemed. Sarutobi had been ruthless in ferreting out spies. Who knew the kind-hearted man had it in him? The cage gave the signal and the sound ninja began casting the sleeping genjutsu. It seemed to catch even Sarutobi for a moment before the old man's brow furrowed and he looked around. Now what could that be? The old Hokage wondered aloud. Your death, old man. The cage grabbed onto the old man and jumped to the top of the arena. His bodyguards soon appeared and trapped the pair inside an impenetrable shield. Nice to see you, my student. I had wondered when you'd show your face again. You knew. This had Orochimaru stumped. How was this result possible? He lunged forward to attack. I have good people working for me, Orochimaru. I trust them and they prove time and again that they've earned my trust. We've been tracking you for years and know a lot of your secrets. We weren't sure exactly what you intended for us, but bringing a crazed Jinchuriki sure makes it clear, right? Die, old man, die. One lunge with his grass cutter cut into Sarutobi and a massive quantity of blood began to spurt out. Lots more blood than should have been possible. When the droplets flicked into Orochimaru's clothing, they began to burn. Quickly, efficiently, right down to the skin. A blood clone. You planned a counterattack to my invasion. Orochimaru couldn't understand what had happened. 9 months to prepare, and my advisors are insane, but insane geniuses. This isn't even Konoha, but a mock-up made for you. That was all the blood clone was able to say before it exhausted its chakra. All the remaining blood scattered. Orochimaru's face began to burn. Retreat. It's a trap. Unfortunately for the invading army, Orochimaru was just about the last person to discover this fact. Using tons of cow blood laced with acids and poisons, the entire mock-up of Konoha was staffed with blood clones. None of them defended themselves when attacked. A single bleeding clone could take out a dozen nearby attackers. Then the various sewer grates began pumping out a powerful knockout gas. Only moments later the army from Suna burst through the walls, and were confronted with the devastation in front of them. Their general ordered a retreat, but anyone inside the walls found they couldn't leave. Some sort of massive sealing array allowed everything in, and nothing out. 37 minutes after the invasion begun, every attacker was dead or unconscious. It took a few more hours to deal with the Cloud Ninja who were attempting a blockade. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, all the survivors were in special cells in the newly constructed prison complex built underneath the mock-up of Konoha, the place where all the real ninja had been waiting to attack their enemies. The hardest to hold were that Gaara ninja who'd fought a blood clone of Sarutobi's under a henge to make him look like Naruto, and Orochimaru himself. Both cells were rigged with poison gas should either attempt to escape. It wasn't very humane, but neither was attempting to invade and destroy a village. XXXXXXXXXXXXXX. A few days later, Sarutobi had the medic Nin stop the intravenous drip that kept Orochimaru unconscious. He wanted to see his student. He wanted to get some answers. 2 hours later Orochimaru was conscious and trying to escape. Sarutobi created a blood clone and watched the interrogation from the safety of his office. A scrying stone was useful for things other than peeping, after all. The clone's mere presence might be enough to enrage his former student. Wake up, little snake, I know you're awake, the blood clone said. Eventually the heavily wounded snake Sanin lifted his head as much as he was able and opened his eyes. Gloating doesn't work for you, sensei. No gloating. Just time for interrogation. You would stoop to do such a thing yourself. Jiraiya begged for the opportunity, but I wanted to see if you'd be reasonable before giving him the chance to crush you with his toads. Orochimaru tried to laugh, but it hurt too much. I was a fool to coddle you so much, my student. I was the genius of my generation and so I favored the genius of your generation, but it was Jiraiya who proved to be the best ninja. I wish you had been a better person, a trustworthy person. I would have loved to made you Hokage, but Namikaze was an exceptional ninja and loyal to the village. Hatred filled Orochimaru's already ugly visage. I deserved it. No, you were on the path to earning it, then you fell from the path. There is a difference. Orochimaru became quiet then. He was obviously plotting something. The blood clone wasn't getting to the core questions Sarutobi wanted answered, but there was no way to control one directly. Safety at the cost of frustration. The Sharingan, Orochimaru. It was worth enough to kill all those people. Not yet, it isn't. My techniques weren't good enough, yet. That poor genin you batted around in the forest, you were going to kidnap him. Something like that, yes. Sarutobi, watching from his office, wondered why Orochimaru would admit to something like that. It must be part of a plan. A cooperative Orochimaru might seem like a broken Orochimaru. But he'd prove himself defiant in the end. I also had heard you'd given up your solitary ways, and joined a little social club, one that liked black cloaks with red clouds on them. Coo. You've heard of Akatsuki, then. Jiraiya is twice the fool I thought he was. To Sarutobi, that made no sense. Why was Jiraiya a fool for discovering them? What would you want enough to put up with other people? I want, and will always want power. I used them to view, and steal other methods, other types of power. They were mere puppets for my plans. And yet you're in this room with me, and they're still alive. But you will not be. I will destroy you. Somehow, even with his head restrained, he was able to propel a long tongue out of his head and snap off Sarutobi's head. The blood clone squirted for a few seconds before disappearing. The Sandaime Hokage knew he'd never get anything from Orochimaru alive, so it was time to end this and send that diseased body off to the experts. Perhaps they could figure out all the things he'd done, the places he'd been. Sitting in his office, with a small tear in his eye, he pressed a button. Seconds later, Orochimaru's cell filled with a poisonous purple gas. The health monitors on Orochimaru's body reported it took him 5 minutes to succumb to poisons which were usually fatal within seconds. Even still, he left the room filled with gas for another hour before he had the room cleared. He didn't know what sort of surprises Orochimaru could pull. The medical orderlies who retrieved the man's body were under orders to behead him before removing the restraints. Even Orochimaru would find it hard to function without a brain, right? Sarutobi watched as the beheading happened and then a snake-like worm shot out of the body. Thankfully more than one of the med nins had been expecting something odd. A quick electrocution jutsu and the worm stopped moving. Sarutobi had shivers down his back. His former student had experimented on others, destroying them. He had done something to himself, turning his true form into a giant, mobile snot ball. What was wrong with him? How had he gone so foul? Now Sarutobi turned his attention to the Suna and Kumo ninja. What to do with them? Kill them, ransom them back to bankrupt their home nations, slap seals on them to make them involuntary slaves. There were a range of options, all more horrifying than the last. And what to do about Iwa? It hadn't participated in this disaster, but it was still an enemy. Indeed, Sarutobi had held off for so long publicly revealing Naruto's status as the son of the late Yondaime just because of Iwa, because he didn't want to subject the boy to assassination attempts just because of a father he'd never been able to meet. Now, though, it was a different story. Naruto would likely become a Chunin once the real Chunin selection exam's final round was played out in a few weeks. And he was a stronger ninja at 12 than Sarutobi himself had been. His Wrath of God technique, something he'd thought up after eating dinner in a cheap restaurant in Casino City, it was truly terrifying. The boy didn't thirst after knowledge, as Sarutobi had. No, he was all about making things work. A different kind of ninja, rather like his practical-minded father. Sandaime would have to make his plan official. He would do as Jiraiya had requested and make Naruto the Toad Sannin's apprentice. Sarutobi would keep giving him lessons as time allowed, but the boy was becoming skilled in developing jutsu that only he would be able to use. In 1 month, Uzumaki Naruto would be recognized as Namikaze Naruto. And his life would change. Hidden Leaf would change. Of course, for safety, no one would know about Kyuubi unless they were willing to accept a secrecy seal. It was too big a military secret even to this day. Yes, yes. Helping the boy develop a public legend, while allowing him to keep his original techniques secret for a while longer, Jiraiya would be useful for that. It would also help position Naruto as a possible successor. That made Sarutobi happy. Now if the boy would just take up an interest in sealing, and perhaps recreate the Hiruzen. If it were possible. Nah. Even Sarutobi knew it was unlikely. Naruto was a tremendous student, but sealing was too much, book work, for someone as active and physical as he was. Questions for another day, Sarutobi mused. Hopes for the future. It was time to shock the village, and get it headed back to greatness. He was old and only had a small amount of time left, a few years probably. He had to make the most of the time. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXX. Itachi was in hidden grass when he overheard frenzied whispers of two Junin in a ninja bar. He was killed. He walked into Hidden Leaf ready to slaughter them, and he was captured, and killed. That bastard. My father tells a story when the snake bastard was still a leaf ninja. That was all Itachi's brain heard. He filled in the rest. There was a rumor, a plausible rumor, that Orochimaru was dead. Anger coated his normally impassive face, but just for a moment. He needed confirmation. If his target was dead, then he didn't know quite what to do. Hatred had made him strong, and now the target was dead. What came after? He quashed the question. That was for the future. Now he needed facts.